Prime Minister, thanks for joining us here on GB News. We've seen the government use hotels, barges like Bibi Stockholm to house illegal migrants. GB News has learnt that the Home Office is using a 98 apartment luxury complex in Chelmsford, a city where hundreds of vulnerable families have substandard and temporary accommodation. Do you understand the frustration of people who've been on council lists for years trying to get accommodation when they see migrants housed in luxury apartments?
Yeah, I think that what's going on currently is completely wrong. We've got a situation which is unfair. British taxpayers are forking out £6 million a day to house illegal migrants in hotels and other accommodation. That's clearly wrong. It's clearly unfair, and that's why I want to put an end to it. Now, in the short term, we're finding alternative sites like the barges that we're bringing in, which are new ways to deal with this problem, which no one else has done, but I've done. But fundamentally, if we want to stop this, we've got to stop people coming here in the first place. And that's why stopping the boats is one of my 5 priorities. That's why we've passed the toughest law that any government has ever passed, which will help us do that.
The EU has delayed its ban on new petrol and diesel cars from 2030 to 2035 in the face of the cost of living crisis, in the face of technical realities. You're keeping that ban here in the UK at 2030, despite the cost of EVs. Why should British motorists suffer more than their EU counterparts?
That's been the government's policy for a long period of time. It remains a government's policy. But my overall approach to all these questions is, of course, I'm committed to net zero, but we've got to do that in a proportionate and pragmatic way that doesn't unnecessarily add burdens or costs to families' lives. And I think we saw a good example of the wrong approach recently when in Uxbridge by-election, you've got the Labour Party, Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan pushing ahead with ULEZ. What does that do? Just puts £12.50 on an ordinary family's bill whenever they want to drop off their kids at school or football practice, go to the supermarket for their weekly shop, or indeed go and visit their GP. I don't think that's wrong. That's not the right approach. That's not our approach to how to solve this problem.
Nigel Farage was right, wasn't he? He was debanked by Coutts for political reasons, which you said at the dispatch box was wrong. We've already seen various executives from Coutts and NatWest resign. Should NatWest chair Howard Davis now be considering his position?
So I think it's good that Nigel Farage and Coutts are in dialogue resolving the issue there. But Nigel Farage also spoke about the broader issue of this impacting other people. And that's my primary concern, because ultimately this isn't about any one individual. This is about values. Values that are important to me and important to our country.
Have you got confidence in Howard Davis?
Hang on, this is really important, rather than the individuals, to focus on the values that are at stake. Values of freedom of expression and privacy. I believe in those values very strongly. People need to be able to have lawfully held views that we might not agree with, but they shouldn't be denied financial services because of them. And they're entitled for their financial affairs to be kept private. I think those values are fundamental to who we are as a country. They're fundamental to me, and that's why I said what I said.
Almost 250,000 GB News viewers and listeners, Prime Minister, have signed our Don't Kill Cash petition. A lot of people, particularly the old and the vulnerable, are worried they can't use cash in lots of places, particularly the 2 million or so who haven't got bank accounts, so can't get debit cards. Do you share their concerns that we mustn't kill cash?
Yeah, so I represent a rural area with people who are also concerned about this particular issue. And that's why, as Chancellor, I started the process, and recently we've concluded it, where we have legislated in law for access to cash regulations, which will allow the government to ensure that, particularly in rural communities, that people do have access to cash, because we accept that it is important to people. Obviously, many people are transitioning to using either their phones or online to do their banking. But whilst that transition happens, people still need to have access to cash. And that's why we've passed new laws that will allow us to work with financial providers like banks, the post office and others to ensure people's access to these vital services.
The UK economy stalled in May, Prime Minister, 0% growth. Are you certain we can avoid recession?
Well, everyone predicted a recession at the beginning of this year after I became Prime Minister, and we've already averted that, actually. So I think people should feel confident about the future. Now, my number one economic priority is to bring inflation down. Inflation is what's causing people the most hassle with the cost of living. It's eating into people's savings and ultimately threatens people's jobs and livelihoods. It's right that our number one economic priority is to bring inflation down. That requires us to make responsible decisions. I will do that and stick to the course of bringing inflation down for everybody. But we are getting on with growing the economy as well. I recently was in Japan, where I came home with billions of pounds of investment. Similarly, when I went to the US, and just the other week, we had an announcement that Tata are investing billions of pounds in our auto industry to build a gigafactory in the UK, one of the largest ever investments of that type. It's going to create thousands of jobs, and it should give people an enormous vote of confidence in our future.
Final question. You are famously a teetotal Prime Minister, but you've certainly enjoyed yourself here at the Great British Beer Festival. What's your favourite pub?
Well, I'm a teetotal chancellor, but we're delivering and backing our great British pubs with our Brexit pubs guarantee, cheaper beer duty in pubs. But my favourite pub is probably, I shouldn't have too many favourites, but closer to home in North Yorkshire, the Golden Lion in Osmotherley. Absolutely fantastic, thoroughly recommend it. And if you're likely to find me at a pub, that's the one that you'll find me at.
Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, thanks for joining us on GB News.
Very nice to see you.